Troy.
Who found Troy?
Heinrich Schleimer, and he was an amateur archaeologist, and when he was 10 years old, he told his dad, you know, after reading these glorious myths of Greece, I've decided to actually go out and find Troy when I get big. And when he was 56 years old, he found Troy. He had to dig through 7 layers of cities that had been built over Troy over time. And then to finally prove he found Troy, he had a mosaic on the ground that was on the bottom floor that was spoken about in legend and in mythology. And it proved that all mythology was real. Heinrich Schlemmer proved that Greek mythology was real just by finding Troy. And then his wife and him smuggled out the gold crown and the gold necklace of Helen of Troy out of Greece. So they had real proof. And just as I have real proof that these anchors are the stone anchors of the fleet of Atlantis and Titans.
So the one that belongs to you, where would it be?
What anchor? I've actually able to claim salvage rights. There's no limit to salvage rights. I've claimed salvage rights on the entire fleet of Atlantis. Also, you can find me on Arc Anchors, Tarpon Springs, John Saxer, S-A-X-E-R.
Oh, you have a website?
No, but there's a lot of newspaper stories written about it.
Oh, okay.
And there's been experts here to look at the stuff, and they say that these are the biggest, most fantastic, most amazing anchors in the world. And the only other anchors similar and comparable to them, besides the stone monuments around the world, the stone circles and stuff, besides those, there are 13 anchors on top of Mount Ararat that are claimed to be the stone anchors of Noah's Ark. So there were many arks during that time, in that time period. Noah was probably a member of the Atlantean fleet. And he happened to survive, where many of the other fleets, they may have survived, but they landed on lowlands, and when their ships came apart and they used the woods for their huts and their fences for their animals, they kept the stones in a big stone circle. So that's why there's stone circles around, is to commemorate the fact that many ships survived the flood. I figure about 400 to 2,000 or so ships survived the flood.
So you're saying there's other arks as big as the Noah's Ark?
Many other arks. Noah's Ark was frozen on top of Mount Ararat, but the rest of the arks were taken apart once they found dry land.
Oh, because you only ever heard of one ark being built.
Right, but there were hundreds of arks according to the amount of stones we found here.
That's interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay,
you got to study. You got to realize that the archaeology is the key to the truth. If you see the evidence that's the remainder of a fleet, then there was a fleet.
That's right.
All right. Well,
Thanks.
thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, and in my case, the Merovingian lines connected, and anything the Merovingian king wants, he gets. It's sort of a bestowing of grace on the king in order to find or to finish his goal. And so all these different things came together for me to find Eden, whether it was through books, through internet, through the local people, through their stories, and through just walking around investigating. And just like Heinrich Schleimer, I had to be stationed here for 15 years to be able to get the lay of the land and the feel of Eden. I even had a boat for about 10 years. I had a sailboat here, and I was able to figure out the Ponce de Leon.
I'm recording here. He's zipping.
He's enjoying the bike store.
Yeah, and I'm enjoying this.
So as it turns out, by having that boat for 10 years on the Anclote River, I was able to see how Ponce de Leon did set up his colony here, and we were able to even find the colony right across from the power plant on the Bart Michler property, and even the first cabin in America that's 500 years old. And so any archaeologist has to just immerse himself in his work, and it took me about 7 years before I even realized I was immersed in this project. So it's been 15 years now, but it's pretty well.
When you say we, who's we?
You know, my friends will help me with tidbits of information. Like the guy across the street at the museum here Harry. He works part-time at the museum. He's just a volunteer, but he heard my story and he came up with a piece of paperwork that showed that Tarpon Springs in the early 1900s, around 1908, was being marketed for $100 an acre as the original and only Garden of Eden. So somebody else, an archaeologist that had come here before me, had seen the stone acres. That guy's name was Frank Cushing, in 1896, and he saw those stone holes in the stones, and he realized that an ancient rock quarry was here, even though he was here investigating 500, 1500-year-old Indian mounds. He realized that there was a 6,500-year-old rock quarry here. And so eventually that information got to the people who were marketing the property, and they all came to the conclusion this must have been ancient Atlantis or Eden as well, because they were of Greek origin, and they put the story together. But they didn't put it together too well in their briefing, in their literature. They just stated it was the Garden of Eden, where I've been able to put together all the information using the internet, the library, and all the people.
So if people wanted to find that info out, they would just type in your name, full name?
Type in the name and they get the basics. It's a change in consciousness, because we usually think of just one ark surviving Noah's flood, and we don't think of the cause of Noah's flood, which may have been a close passing planetoid to the Earth, which may have caused the flipping of the Earth due to the magnetics involved with planets traveling close to each other. And so what it really looks like, according to all the information, is that the Earth flipped 180 degrees during Noah's flood, and the whole Earth flooded, and that's why Noah's Ark ended up on top of a 2.5-mile ridge high above sea level. It wasn't because the whole Earth had a lot of water come out. It was because it flipped, and the centrifugal force allowed the wave to push Noah's Ark up that high. Or if you happen to be on the high seas, as other arks were, when the receding water would go down as the Earth's poles stabilized in the opposite points of the Earth, then they could settle down on wherever their property was and claim that as home again and let their animals and their people out. And it was just fortunate that Atlantis had such a big navy and that Poseidon created such a big navy, or there wouldn't have been any life at all. Because you know, you see Noah coming off of the ark, and you wonder, how did all these other people get here if he was the only one that survived? Everybody that reads the Bible wonders that question. Well, the answer is other people survived, and how they survived was either on mountaintops or in other boats. And the Atlantean Navy was so big, and each boat had its own village equipped inside the boat so that it could go anywhere in the world, dismantle, and become a whole village.
That makes sense to me.
Anyway, that's the way I see it. And so you read my literature off the internet, Ark Anchors, Tarpon Springs, and you would see that that it's basically, the theory is that the Greek Eden was right over here. And that's why I stick here, is because the Greek Eden's here. There's one other issue too. The issue is the Garden of Eden, the Tree of Life, and original sin. And it turns out that the Brazilian pepper tree, of which there's 700,000 tons of it in Florida, turned out to be the medicinal tree that Poseidon, the Greek god, created in order to have people drink as a tea or a brew.
Now we just...
And you drink that tea and you become purified from the original sin, which is a bacterium that was planted into mankind from having sex with the extraterrestrials.
That's the original sin?
Yeah. And so they created the Brazilian pepper tree, and if you look at Egyptian stuff or Sumerian stuff, you see them holding a sprig, and that's a sprig of the Brazilian pepper tree. So if people wanted to cure themselves from any disease, they might want to check into Brazilian pepper tree tea, because it turns out it's like a cure-all.
It just so happens that there was a Brazilian tree where we visited, and he put some of the berries in his mouth, and I tried it. They just taste a little bit hot, but then they said you could be allergic to it because it's like poison oak or poison
everybody
ivy.
wants to say it's like a poison sumac relative, and they want. But if you look up the veterinary studies and the human studies, and some guy from South Africa said he doesn't know what it is, but it's a cure-all. But it confirmed my theory that it was the tree of life from the Garden of Eden, because it's the most antiseptic beverage you can drink.
Do you drink it?
Yeah, I drink it. I drink it.
So how do you prepare it?
You get real sick. Well, you make it. You take the leaves. You dry the leaves out. You mince them up into a tea. Steam them up into a tea. Make a tea out of it. And,
You don't use the berries.
you do. You can. I have. I've used them both. It's actually an intoxicant. It makes you kind of drunk the first couple times you do it. But then it gets you real sick. Your stomach gets real sick because all the bacteria is leaving your body. So you have either, diarrhea or whatever, sniffles, you may cough it out, but you're coughing out bacteria, and people think that they're allergic to the drug when they don't realize they're being cleansed.
Oh, okay.
So that's why they get the story that they're being allergic to it or whatnot.
Oh, okay. Great.
So that pretty much covers world history from just before the flood.
We'll have to come back for the second half of it. Thanks.
Yeah, I got to eat my...
Your brownie.
I got to go for my brownie now. No
See ya.
more information
Okay.
for the world.